Well, Shubhendu Ghosh is joining us live now from Washington, D.C. with an update. Shubhendu, so what, it's now obviously probably comes to the end of polling time there. Fill us in with what we are to expect.
Right, Mark. I continue to be at that polling station I was about an hour ago, where long queues were seen. Now the queues have disappeared. People who had come have been able to vote. There are many people who are still coming in and dropping their postal ballot at this box that has been kept here to accept the ballot box and the votes. I asked them about how long the voting will continue. The authorities here say that 8 p.m. is the cutoff time for people to be in the queue. If anybody is in the queue till 8 p.m., they will be allowed to vote. It's about 6:45 here in Washington, D.C. local time. We've seen very encouraging voting, long queues all through the day across the polling stations at Washington, D.C. Quite reminiscent of the kind of encouraging voting that we saw during the early voting. Over 80 million people had already exercised their franchise even ahead of the election day. And similar trends were seen today, election day. About an hour from now, at many places around the East Coast, the states would be concluding their polling and the polling would close. But 8 p.m. is likely to be the deadline for people to be in the queue to exercise their franchise. One last opportunity.
Right. Shubhendu, to avoid people standing in the queue for a long time, they have provided different kinds of systems such as mail voting, voting through, by mail ballots, as well as also absentee voting. Can you fill us in about, the other systems of voting?
That's right, Mark. In that sense, it's an organized democracy with a lot of reforms. Here in the United States, you can vote in different ways. First, of course, there is early voting and the voting on the election day. Absentee voting, if you cannot come in person and if you can give a proper excuse for the reason why you cannot come and drop your ballot at the voting center, you can give a reason, and as an absentee voter, you will be allowed to vote. Your postal, your voting card will, your ballot will reach your house, and you can exercise your franchise and send it through a post. Then, of course, there are postal ballots. You can fill those ballots, and you can come here at the polling stations and drop those ballots. You can stand in the queue and you can get access to the document, the 6-page long document where you put your vote for the different candidates besides the president, other candidates such as in Senate and House of Representatives as well. And you can exercise that. So in that sense, very unique, a system which is meant to encourage more and more people to exercise their franchise. By law, some 45 days in advance, across different states, people were eligible to vote in these elections, but today is the final date, about 8 o'clock,
right,
at least Eastern time, and also the time difference taken into account in the West Coast, the polling will close. So this hectic electioneering, one phase of it, concludes in a short while from now. Mark?
Right, and despite all these reforms that have made voting easy, did you see, some sort of voter apathy, or would you say that there have been, the people have come out wholeheartedly and tried to vote, and that the voting percentage is going to be very, very high?
It is most likely going to be the latter, Mark. From what we have seen in the early voting trends, the encouraging number, it's already a record number, over 80 million people voting in advance. Republicans also coming forward, that's sort of a new record in itself, coming out with as high numbers as the Democrats. The women voters coming out in large numbers as far as the early voting is concerned. And here too, across polling stations in Washington, D.C., we've seen long queues, and the people we've spoken to, more than voter apathy, what we could sense was voter anxiety. They think it's a very closely fought election. They think that the issues that the election is fought over, whether it's abortion or the borders, illegal immigration, these are issues that directly affect their lives. And the two leaders, the key contenders for the White House, have taken such opposing stand that it is very, very important for the voters to really calibrate what combination of issues and the positions they're going to take And they're coming in large number, therefore, to vote because they think it's not an election. So polarizing it has been, not an election where one can afford to really sit at the margins and watch it from the outside. They want to be a part of it and do their bit.
Right. Also, Shubhendu, we've seen that the country is so clearly divided into red and blue, and some states, never change. Are we likely to see some sort of surprises this time round, or it's only these 7 swing states that are going to always decide the presidential elections in the United States?
Well, it's difficult to answer that one, Mark, but given that there are many firsts in these elections, to begin with, the voter participation, the kind of narrative that the two leaders had put forth, which made this such a polarized contest, it wouldn't be surprising if we get some interesting figures and developments, as you mentioned, also from the non-swing states. The issues deeply divide the people. I could give you an example that many voters that we spoke to, the cities that we traveled to, they traditionally, many Republican supporters, they said that we support Republican, we've been voting for them for years, but the issue of abortion as a woman, they would say that it is very close to us, and therefore we're not sure what our final vote is going to be. Similarly, an example involving the Democrats. Educated, young, liberal immigrants, Indian Americans and also others, who spoke very passionately about how they've been traditionally Democrat supporters, but the issue of illegal immigration resonates with them. They do think it's a problem. They do think that Democrats, perhaps because it was a Democrat government, and perhaps they did not do enough. In fact, in the past couple of years, America has seen one of the largest influx of illegal immigrants, right, more in New York. That's where we spoke to these people. And they were concerned that, although we are traditional Democrat supporters, we need someone to deal with this issue with a strong hand, because if illegal immigration does not stop, one of the first section of population it threatens are the legal immigrants, because they have to wait for longer, they have to scavenge for resources. So in that sense, we see a great deal of overlap in Democrat and Republican supporters, Mark. It'll be interesting to see finally what choices they make and who they choose as their leader.
Right. Some of the analysis that has been made is that the Democrat voter of a few decades ago could be a Republican today, in the sense that the issues that the Democrats used to talk about back then are pretty much the issues that the Democrats are that the Republicans are talking about now. Maybe the Republicans are progressing a little slower than the Democrats. And over a period of time, there's going to be some sort of movement between this voter base. And do you see that, by talking to people, that, there could be in generations, there could be differences in terms of voting in families, for instance?
There are some trends that we're looking at, Mark. That's a very interesting point that you've raised, and it also has to be sort of understood a little delicately, because there are so many levels of complications involved in it. Just for an example, taking a cue from what you said, the traditional Democrat supporter, the middle class, the lower middle class in America would go with the Democrat traditionally. The elites, the rich, would be Republican supporters. But we've seen some fractures that are coming in there. We've seen, especially when we were engaging with college-going students, we see that the middle class also is experiencing a certain fracture. The educated, college degree holding youngsters, professionals, they still have their loyalties with the Democrats because they've also benefited from certain interventions, whether it's about tackling the loan burden of the students or creating more opportunities for immigrants and welcoming them is concerned. But at the same time, the blue-collar workers here in America, Mark, who do not have a college degree, who are working in different vocations and to make their ends meet, they feel a little left out from the larger democratic narrative and the provisions that the Democrats have had, the welfare measures. These blue-collar workers feel that it really hasn't addressed their concerns. It has really aimed at college-going, educated elites in terms of professional elites. And therefore, that middle class is getting fractured, and a part of it is then moving to Republicans, hoping that they would address their concerns in a better manner. Latino vote is also interesting to study, Mark. Latinos we refer to as people coming in from Latin America. Again, as immigrants, traditionally, the immigrants are seen as being welcomed by Democrats, and therefore they also return their loyalty by supporting the Democrats. But Latinos who've settled down here over the years, who've become citizens who are Americans, who are voting, they also, in a very interesting way, stop identifying themselves as immigrant, and they like to project their identity as American as it gets. And
Yes.
that identity, that sort of slightly bordering on a nationalist sort of an identity, resonates more with the Republican Party. So we see those interesting trends happening, the traditional Democrat voters slipping into the Republican territory, and vice versa.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Shubhendu Ghosh, for joining us for the moment.